similar to ours. So their lungs actually sit here. Here. So right where this wound is where the end of Barnabas's lung is. So that injury, thankfully, missed Barnabas's lungs, which is really, really good, because that would have made things much more difficult for Barnabas if the lungs had been damaged. But thankfully they haven't, so that's really, really great. So Barnabas, like I said, he does need to breathe air, and so because of that, we're actually going to keep him in this shallow water for another couple of days. So Barnabas has to come to the surface in order to breathe air, and that can be quite difficult for Barnabas if he isn't feeling very well. So if he doesn't have a lot of energy and he's struggling, then he will find it really difficult to come up and take those nice big breaths. So basically, to give him a better chance at recovering, we're going to keep him in this shallow tub for just a little while longer, because that way he can kind of lay here and rest and relax. So with this shallow water, he can rest and relax, and then all he needs to do to breathe is just lift his head up. So once he's had a few days to start to feel better and to get more energy back, he will be able to go out in one of our deeper tanks where he'll be able to swim and move around a little bit more. But for now, we want him to just regain his energy and just start to feel better. So Barnabas has only been with us for a couple of days. He was found by members of the public who were concerned about Barnabas. So they noticed that he was floating in the Laguna Madre Bay. Now, it's not unusual to see sea turtles at the surface of the water. They do come up to breathe air. So they come up, they'll take a nice big breath, and then they typically will dive back down again. But Barnabas wasn't doing that. He was just at the surface, floating. He had his flippers out, his head was down. So the people that saw him noticed that something definitely wasn't right. So they called our stranding hotline. So we have a stranding hotline that is active 24/7. So that means that day or night, 365 days a year, if you are on South Padre Island or Boca Chica Beach or any of our surrounding waters, and you see a sea turtle in distress, you can call that number and we will respond. So even though we close to the public at 4 o'clock, we are a 24/7 operation. So we are always here, we're always ready to respond to patients like Barnabas. So once we got that call, our response team went out to go and assess, and they found Barnabas, and sure enough, he did need some rescuing. But he is almost 100 pounds, so he's very, very heavy. So it took multiple staff, basically had to get in the water to try and lift him out. So it's what we call an in-water rescue. But thankfully, they were able to get him. And like I said, if the members of public hadn't reported him to us, then he wouldn't be able to recover in our hospital today. So we're very, very grateful for that. So we will put that number in the comments of this video. So if you're ever on our island or in the area, make sure you save that number so you can help us save sea turtles like Barnabas in the future. Now, when Barnabas came in, he didn't really look like he does now. He's kind of unrecognizable from when he came in on Wednesday, because he was covered in what we call epibiota. So epibiota is just the fancy name that we use when we are talking about the living things that can sometimes grow on a sea turtle shell. So we have some right here. So these are barnacles that we actually pulled off of Barnabas's shell. This is just a fraction of what we found. He was absolutely covered. He also had a ton of algae. There were worms, little crabs, all sorts of things growing and living on his shell. And you might have seen our video of us removing barnacles from other patients in the past. If you haven't, definitely check it out. It's very satisfying. So it isn't uncommon for sea turtles to have barnacles on their shell. But when they do have it in a really, really high amount, it kind of tells us how they've been doing for the last couple of weeks. So normally if a sea turtle is doing well, they're spending a lot of time moving around, they're swimming, they're looking for food. They might spend some time sleeping and resting, but they're pretty active overall. And when they're active, it's harder for things to start living and growing on their shell. So when we find a sea turtle like Barnabas, who was absolutely covered, you can see all of these white circles are from where barnacles had been, and you can see he does still have some green algae on his shell right now. When they're covered like that, it tells us that he's probably been struggling for a while. So he would have unfortunately been floating at the surface for a little while before he thankfully floated in and was found by those members of the public. So the very first thing we did was clean off all of that stuff from his shell so that we could get a better idea of what kind of injuries he might have. So down at the base of his shell is where his biggest wound is. So there's this really large crack that kind of goes right across here. And that has gone right through his shell. So that kind of white stuff that you can see underneath, these kind of white and pink areas, that is tissue. So that's kind of like skin, softer material things. So that's actually underneath his shell. So we believe, basically, because sea turtle shells are so thick and strong, it takes a lot of force to do this kind of damage. So it's most likely that Barnabas was unfortunately hit by a boat shortly before he was found. But believe it or not, Barnabas is quite lucky because when he first arrived, we took a series of x-rays and it helped us to see kind of how extensive that damage is and if there was any damage on the inside of his body as well. And remember how I said before that sea turtles breathe air, so they do come to the surface. They have lungs very similar to us, and those lungs sit kind of along here and along here. So they are right underneath the shell. So it goes kind of the shell, and then right underneath that is where the lungs are. And Barnabas's lung actually ends right here. So right above the wound is the bottom of Barnabas's lung. So he was really, really lucky because it meant that his injury and the damage that was caused actually missed his lung. So he might not look like he was very lucky, but he actually was. So it's really, really good news that his lungs haven't been damaged. That will make it much easier for him to recover. So when he arrived, like I said, we took x-rays. We've also taken a CT scan. We've done blood work. Very, very similar things that you might experience if you went to the doctor yourself. And then based on those results, we have been able to make a treatment plan specifically for Barnabas. So he's getting lots of different types of medication, not only to help him heal, but also just to help him feel a bit better as well. As you can see right now, he's a little bit lethargic. He's just quite sleepy, doesn't have a lot of energy, which is why he's in this shallow tub in our clinic. So over the next few days, as he's starting to feel better, we will move him out into one of our deeper tanks. But right now, we want him to just conserve his energy and use all of that into feeling better and healing. So we don't want him to have to put in too much work to come to the surface and breathe. So we're going to keep him nice and shallow, where all he has to do is lift up to breathe. So with that, we're going to leave him to continue his recovery journey. We will be keeping you posted on how he's doing, so keep following us on social media. If you haven't already, please make sure you save our stranding hotline, because one day you could end up saving a sea turtle like Barnabas here. Feel free to come in and meet our patients. We're open Tuesday through Sunday, 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. You can also symbolically adopt our patients. All of that money goes right back into the medical care treatment. So thank you all so much for your support. I think we had a couple of technical issues, so apologies for that. But thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you soon.